Hello and welcome to the next episode of Two Girls Talk Transits. Today we're reviewing the astrology from February 9th through February 15th, and we're your host. I'm Maddie,
And I'm Kaleigh.
and welcome. So we have a lot of astrology this week that's centered around Aquarius and Uranus energy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's gonna feel similar to the very end of January when we had that new moon in Aquarius with Uranus also stationing direct. So that was
Mm-hmm.
around the 29th, 30th of January, and now we're kind of getting the next piece of that. So we started off on February 9th. Mercury in Aquarius conjuncts the sun in Aquarius, so that's the height of this Mercury retrograde cycle from the last Mercury retrograde when Mercury was retrograde in Sagittarius. That was all in December. And now this is like the final endpoint of that cycle where you get all the information, all the downloads, kind of all the understandings that you were
Mm-hmm.
maybe lacking in Sagittarius or during December when that was retrograde.
Yeah, that's a good point because there was like a some lack of confusion. Lack of clarity and like a bunch of confusion going on. Mercury doesn't really do well in Sagittarius when it's in its. I always get detriment and fall confused, which which one, Maddie? Clarify.
It's detriment. So you know because it's opposite. Detriment is when it's opposite the sign that it is rulership or domicile in, and then fallen is when it's opposite the sign that it's exalted in.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, when it was in its detriment in Sag. Um, it was like missing the smaller details, so we had some like big ideas floating around, but maybe like didn't have the details to go along with that. And then its ingress into Capricorn, I think we gained some more clarity or more like practicality. And then now, in Aquarius, I think we are able to get some new, fresh ideas. But like you said, maybe it could be like a visitation of like older topics, but like having a fresh perspective or like an expansive perspective on that. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, sorry. No, I was just saying, like, it is. It's just like these Mercury Sun cazimis, what they're called when they're like a planet is conjunct the sun,
Mhm.
but it's like also part of its cycle. It's just usually bringing a big insight moment or a big peak, like aha moment, you know?
Yeah, I think that would be like really on par to like experience something like that during this time. It would be definitely like things might finally click or feel like, yeah, like now I get it, especially since now um, Jupiter in the sign of Gemini is direct, and then
Mm.
Mercury ruling that, we have like a lot more clarity than we had been working with in the past. So, yeah, I think it will definitely be like an aha moment that you can expect throughout the week, especially as it relates to your 10th house or like another Saturn ruled house in your chart, like Capricorn.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Especially as it relates, you want to look to Aquarius, you want to look to Capricorn. I mean, you also want to look to, like you said, where Mercury's ruling Jupiter and Gemini and maybe even Virgo. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I think it's a moment of clarity in the midst of that. We can't forget the North Node and Pisces are still really close together. Now, the North Node is like separating from Neptune. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
Neptune and North Node in Pisces, but the North Node is separating from Neptune now. But it's still like a big that planet Neptune is still very much heightened confusion. So I do wonder if this aspect's going to be like a split between what you intuitively have been feeling and sensing like in your body, but then what you
Mm-hmm.
logically know or like reason to be true. And then how do you balance both of those things? Like you're feeling this way, but logically it looks to be this way. And so it's kind of an insight moment around that. Maybe what things have you been deluded on or unclear about, maybe too, with a Neptune North Node conjunction.
Yeah, there might be like only so far that we can go in the realms of clarity
Right.
with that conjunction, like you mentioned. Um,
Yeah,
but nonetheless, I do think that this is like a powerful moment where we should feel clearer than we typically have um, previously. So, yeah.
I think so. And then
Hmm.
on the same day, on the Sunday, the February night, Mars, still retrograde in Cancer,
Hmm.
is making its next second trine to Saturn in Pisces. I don't remember exactly when the first one was, but it was in October.
Okay.
Um, it was in October anyways, but it doesn't really necessarily matter. Like I was noticing with some of these that it's not necessarily the same exact theme that comes back, but the same kind of feeling of taking a line action or maybe having to review your action in a more like standardized, steadfast, Saturnian way. Like again, there's a lot of need for like logic and traditionalism, I think, with those guys today. You
Yeah.
know?
I could definitely see that. I think we're being challenged, like, I think I've said this before, but like in the action sector of our life, like where we want to take action and what we want to do. And, especially with Mars being retrograde and then meeting that trine with Saturn is like an extra layer of um, like trepidation, I want to say. Like you have to
Mhm.
go even slower or like have to take even more care than you would even want to. So we are getting kind of like it's not like a full halt, but it's kind of like, we really need to assess and make sure that, the direction that we're going in has all those practical matters figured out in one way or another.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, with the moon so close to Mars today, as you can see, it's like
Oh
right
yeah, I do
there.
see that.
I do think there's just so much desire for action, but then there's all this
Mm,
Saturnian influence. It's like, yes, go slow, or no, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work either. Like, maybe a lot of this day, especially with the Mercury Sun conjunction happening in a Saturn rule sign, is like these are all the things that did not work out for me, or like were not an option for me.
hmm.
I mean, closed doors are still messages and still directions, but I do feel like there's still that tension of the moon there wanting action forward or some sort of direction forward, but the Saturn elements today are like, those are the ways that you can't do that.
Hmm. I wonder if this like Sun Mercury will be like aha, like I understand why things have to be the way that they are, or like, like maybe the realization, like, okay, I have big plans and like I know that those big plans are going to have to be like broken down into smaller chunks. Um,
Mm,
it might be like my supervisor, like my therapy supervisor, he's like, how do you eat an elephant? And it's like one bite at a time. So it's like having this like huge idea and then like, you can only do it in like you can only go up the steps in the direction, you can't like
right.
yeah. So it reminds me of that.
Yeah, it is. There's this like element of like, okay, we can't deal with all of this, so we have to choose the small things that we can do or like those step-by-step things that we can do and focus on those individual roles that inherently change the collective.
Right. Right. Very much so. I think this
Yeah.
too is like kind of, I could see it being pretty on par with like the political nature of things too. I feel like, we're gathering information and starting to understand the bigger pictures of things. And maybe this like Saturn Mars is like highlighting like, um, these are the things that are gonna have to get like cut out of society or like we're gonna have to get like really strict on the rules, like the actions to being like stricter on the rules of things. Um,
Mm,
or revisiting like previous rules and stuff like that.
yeah. Yeah, there is a lot of like deciding, yeah, deciding what rules or deciding what decisions or things that you can control too, almost with Saturn, Mars.
Yeah, right. It's like I think a lot of us don't know like what I think we maybe said this before, but we don't know like what can we control and what can we not. So I think
Right.
that's very North Node conjunct Neptune also. We're kind of confused about what is the path like forward. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just maybe more of like that aha. I mean, I do think there's some insight, there's something clicking that's like, okay, yes, I can at
Hmm.
least do this. And then the Mars Saturn is having to take that action that is not necessarily what you wanted, but necessary action to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that's where we start off with. And then we will shift gears for the rest of the week. And Uranus is going to be your main feature for the rest of the week, pretty much, is that on the
No.
10th of Monday, I know, right? The 10th of Monday, Mercury is going to be the first of the two to square Uranus in Taurus. So
So we,
that's,
mhm.
yeah, it's on the 10th. So we start with that. It later on the 10th or like earlier on the 11th, I think, but Mercury's moving slightly faster now, it's past the sun, and it's going to square Uranus. And, shocking news, shocking conversations, a disruption to your normal mental processing, learning something new from the Kazemi that translates to you saying something that's
Mhm.
challenging the social norm. There's a lot of need to now Uranus wants us to break free from Saturn because it is the first outer planet after Saturn that's like past Saturn's bounds that represents freedom and sort of like past the traditional sense. So there's some element of like, okay, this is where the borders are. And now all the Uranian aspects this week are like, how do we break those?
Mm. Very interesting. Yeah, I find it so interesting that we have that like that moment of clarity and then it's like disruption immediately after. I think
Yeah.
it reminds me of like a somebody who would do like ayahuasca and like they go into this like trance or whatever and then they like get all this clarity and then they come out the next day and they're like, I've unlocked the secrets of the world. And it's like, it's like the very like Uranus, like, let me disrupt like your or challenge like the way that you've thought about things.
Right.
And yeah, like offer that new perspective. So it could be you that's like coming out and being like, hey, got this insight, like let me change the way we're seeing things. Or it could be, outside forces too, maybe challenging us to see things or think about things differently. But Maddie, like you said, also I think could definitely like challenge like it could be like, how do we break past those structures that are in place? Yeah.
Right. Like, how can we, like, I feel like when we have a Cazimi and a Saturn rule sign, you're very aware then where the boundaries are. You're very aware of like, okay, this is how it is. But then you're
Mhm.
honest, like, okay, but now what do we do now? Like, okay, now we have to push against that. And to your other point, like, is it you or is it somebody in your life? Like, I think sometimes it's helpful to look at like what house this is. So, like,
Good.
if
Yeah.
this house is like on the what am I looking at? Your right side of your chart or like the top half of your chart, it's
Right.
probably maybe going to be somebody else or like you in a relationship, interpersonal relationship dynamic. If Mercury is more on the left-hand side and the bottom half of your chart, it's probably going to be more you.
Okay,
But
so
that's
you're
just like a,
saying like if it's over here
yeah,
or
that's
down
more you.
here, yeah, this
That's
would
more
be like
you.
you. And then
Yeah.
conversely, if it's on the
That's,
top or on the right side, it's probably
yeah.
somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, and it may be you, but impacting somebody else. Like other people are now more
Mm,
involved versus if it's in that like right hand side, downside, and maybe just you being impacted by something and having an awareness about yourself or like your immediate environment.
yeah.
But that's not like a solid fast rule, but I think it generally works.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I would second that. I think also we can look to the Mercury ruled places of our chart to see where
Mm.
we might also experience some change. Like I know right now, Uranus has been squaring my natal Mercury for like the longest time, and it affects like the Mercury ruled areas of my chart, so my second house and my fifth house. So. I would definitely look if you're having like while we're having these or this square to like where does Mercury rule in your own chart? Um, and just see if there's like any relationship between what you experience and those areas.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely look into the Gemini house and look to the Virgo house because those
Hmm.
houses are probably experiencing a disruption or change as well from this aspect.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
The last piece that I'll say to this is that because this aspect is happening first and then the sun is happening directly next, Mercury
Hmm.
being the messenger can bring you a lot of messages this day. And then on the 11th, but I mean, we could probably just go and talk about the full moon, which is technically early on the 12th.
Okay.
Because on the 11th, the sun exactly squares Uranus, but then the full moon does it pretty much the same day or like a little bit after.
Hmm.
So now we
So
have
we
a
have
really
that
big,
square.
yeah, we have this really bright full moon in Leo at 24 of Leo, and is making that square to Uranus at 23.
Yeah.
That's so, yeah. I mean, whenever the moon gets involved, you know that something is materially going to manifest or going to change. Like with just the sun squaring Uranus, it may be a moment of like, okay, Mercury had these messages or I had these conversations that disrupted things. Now I am going to be a change, like, or my awareness, I see that this is going to change in the way that I'm living out life, like that's often the sun squaring Uranus, or maybe your own presence is a change or a disruption in society. But then when the
Hmm.
moon gets involved, it like literally manifests into a physical, material, actual shift or change.
I think I've seen like some other astrologers to relate the moon to like the people at large. Like
Mm,
when they do like location astrology about like specific towns and like events that happen, they'll look like to the aspects that the moon makes to see like what's happening with the people. Um,
yeah,
so also moon, like we have something going on with ourselves, sun squaring Uranus, and then also something going on with everybody else or the people at large, moon square Uranus.
yeah,
So there is that definitely like changes in the air, like on both fronts.
yeah. I mean, it's this is not gonna be a quiet. This is not gonna be a quiet full moon. It's not gonna be a quiet week, and
Yeah.
it's definitely going to speak to a lot of disruptions and shifts to like you are impacted, but then your role in the collective is impacted, and then the collective is impacted. And like and I mean Uranus is now direct, so this is usually something that is like a forward movement or like a change that is like progressive, that hasn't happened before. It's not a review of a previous change.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it is usually something new and intense in that way. And I don't know. I mean, I don't like this full moon in terms of like everything that's going on, at least, in the United States. But I think it also, again, speaks to everything that is going on in the United States. So,
Mhm. I
you
think we're
know,
getting a bit of like preceding information too with these Uranus aspects because once Uranus ingresses into Gemini, I don't know what degree it's at, but it does we are having a Uranus return in the US in Gemini.
I think
Um
it's an early Uranus or an early Gemini. I think Uranus is an early Gemini. I might be totally wrong, but I
yeah, I
think
would
it's
have to check.
early. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're getting like some preceding information and Uranus, especially in the US, if you're in the US, is something that we're going to be getting very comfortable with, as uncomfortable as it is. There's going to be a lot of change, a lot of reform, um, whether that comes from the system at large or the people pushing back or a mix of both. Um, we will see.
Yeah, in the assembly chart of the United States, just sorry, go back to that.
It's
Uranus is in
okay.
8 degrees of Gemini.
So that
So
won't be, when does it
I don't
ingress?
think it's not going to be exact this year. So Uranus does enter into Gemini this
Okay.
year, but it doesn't get to 8 degrees, I don't think, before it retrogrades because it's going to retrograde back into Taurus. But I think it's until next year. But the co-presence is going to be enough.
Yeah, that's what I was
And
thinking too. Yeah.
yeah. But this is like kind of the last really big full moon that we get that's like aspecting Uranus and Taurus, which I think Uranus and Taurus has been a lot about too, like our material, our money, and like our food.
Yes.
And I know there's been a lot online of our food not being restricted. I mean, there's a bird flu going on, which I can't find eggs anywhere. I don't know if you have eggs, but I don't have eggs anywhere.
We do have eggs
Like,
and I have two chickens actually, so
oh, that's a lot of money right there. Just
I know,
kidding.
right? I've got like some chicken real estate.
But like also, Uranus and Taurus has really disrupted our financial sector and like what we value in terms of like what is valuable, like what our money is looking like. And now there's like, talk of like demolishing the dollar, switching to crypto. Like a lot of those things of like our money are things that we value in our food and our food like supply chain can really be brought in collectively with this full moon in Leo, I think.
Yeah, and even to your point, as we're like wrapping up this like Uranus and Taurus, we are getting with the implementation of the tariffs, we are getting like a restriction put on or a change to like the goods that are imported. So we are all going to feel the effects of that because we get a lot of like Chinese products, and
Mhm.
Americans are very materialistic. So if you're going to challenge any country on the material front, the US is like,
I know.
we're going to suffer the most because we're so materialistic. So I think we're definitely, yeah, feeling the effects of that. On a separate note, too, I think that like there's a lot of farm programs out there. So if anybody's like wanting to start a farm, I think that there's actually like a lot of government money that's being like allocated to those
Maybe.
individuals. Yeah. Well, I guess maybe we'll see. I've seen people who have like gotten the funds and there are like
Okay.
resources too that
They
they'll
do,
like
yeah.
come out and like assess your land and like help you grow crops and things like that. So if that's something that you're interested in, it's out there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it will be interesting to see what happens, but The, the last piece of this is just like for you personally, you want to look to your fixed signs. If you are a fixed sign rising, so
Mhm.
Aquarius, Scorpio, Leo, or Taurus, this is going to impact you in probably a major way or a significant shift in terms of like you, yourself, your career, your home. And then otherwise, you would just want to look at where those, especially like the Leo part, is definitely going to get lit up and the Aquarius part is something you've already been working through, and it translates to the
Mhm.
Leo part, right? Like it suddenly highlights that area of your life, and then it may be brought by a disruption or a change in the Taurus part, or all those places may get changed because they are all connected right now.
Yeah, yeah. So the fixed signs will definitely be feeling this the most.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, but other signs too. We'll see
right.
what transpires. Anytime Uranus is like involved, I feel like it's like inevitable you're gonna feel some kind of change.
Yeah,
And
I
whether
think
big
so.
or small, we shall see.
Right. So
Mhm.
from there, like we'll just wrap up this week, but the 14th, Valentine's Day, I mean, disrupting Valentine's week, but on Valentine's Day, just we have Mercury shifting into Pisces, joining the Pisces group, and we're back with Mercury is both domicile and exalted in Virgo, so now it's both detriment and fallen
Oh,
in
yeah.
Pisces.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, isn't it? I have
Yeah.
my progressed um Mercury is in Pisces. So that's fun. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely um,
Mhm.
more of an emotional communicator. We could be communicating more about like our feelings and how we feel about things. And um, I feel like it's kind of Okay, so like Mercury and Virgo, right, would be like having the details, having the facts, and being able to like communicate logically, like saying like, this is this because of this, and like you have the facts to back it up, right? Whereas like Mercury in Pisces is like, well, I feel like this, like even if I have no facts that are like supporting that, or like there's no details really that I can say like, oh, this is why I feel like this. It's just like that general sense. And I think that when we communicate in that way with like no facts or like no real information behind it, it kind of can like throw people off because they're like, okay, well, I'm not really getting it, you know? So, yeah, go ahead.
No, that is a good point because I was just gonna say like, Mercury ruling Virgo and Gemini exalted in Virgo, those are the two signs that tend to pick apart. They tend
Hmm.
to separate.
Hmm.
Virgo separates on an earthly realm, Gemini separates on a very more aerial mental realm, but they tend to separate things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Versus the signs of Sagittarius and Pisces tend to be collectively or cohesive and like bring things together. And,
Right.
especially Pisces with the water sign, it's all about the big soup and the big, earthly, watery experience that we all have. And so Mercury there cannot separate. It's like literally impossible for Mercury to separate. So Mercury is forced to look at things in the entirety and the whole, as you were saying, and
Hmm.
like just accept that without understanding how that is to be, you know?
Yeah, that's such a good point. I hadn't thought about that. And like, I mean, I had, but I hadn't like really related it. Like having that analogy of like separating and then whole, I think is like a really good way to like paint the picture of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mercury is definitely challenged here. We are
Yeah,
gonna
but
be, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying it's good for poetry though. It is good for like, the collective speech and just softer like, you know, let's let's like pare down the details and just look at the whole of things. And it's better for like, making people feel inclusive and like included in their speech and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point. There are like, even though Mercury is in detriment and it's fall in Pisces, there are some like notable poets and celebrities who have this placement, who are able to like communicate in a way that makes you feel something. I think that Lady Gaga is actually one of these people. I believe she has a Mercury Jupiter conjunction in the sign of Pisces.
Yeah,
So that,
she's a popular figure because she gets impacted by the Venus in Aries retrogrades, I think. And so, because her
oh,
Venus is in Aries, her sun's in Aries, but then like her Mercury is in Pisces.
mhm.
Um, so I think we're gonna see a bit from Lady Gaga coming up this spring. But yeah, that was good. Good
I'm
example.
interested. Yeah, I'm interested. I really like her. So, there's
Yeah.
just something about her that I'm like, she's cool. But yeah, I think also Jupiter is kind of floating the boat there with her Jupiter and Mercury
Right.
conjunction. But nonetheless.
Nonetheless, still like really potent, real good lyrical like poetry words, but then like comes across very loud. And that's all the Aries energy, too much Pisces energy. You kind of like fit in everywhere because you're being so empathetic, but then Aries energy gives you that individualistic
Yeah, that
component.
actually is a good point to make is that sometimes like a Mercury in Pisces can be challenged because we are afraid to hurt somebody else's feelings. It's like the people
Mm,
pleaser. So,
yeah.
it would be like so compassionate to a fault, like that it can't stand up and it can't speak its truth because it it would be like ultra compassionate or like a feeling of like, oh, I don't know, like if I'm the person who should say this, like am I good enough? It's kind of like that lacking confidence. Um,
Hmm.
but I think that Venus being in Aries should kind of push that a bit because we're having kind of like that drive a little bit more. So we'll see how it pans out, but yeah, that's definitely a something we could experience is like being afraid or like a little cautious with communicating. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And so don't know. That's kind of the note we end on. I think
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, I don't know. This week is definitely going to be one to watch and see what happens. And me, maybe the last piece of this is like Mercury entering into Pisces is like whatever really did get disrupted and shaken up. Like there is that strong empathetic communication that happens afterwards that like brings people back together if it's been really disrupting.
Yeah, it could be like wiping each other's tears, like soothing each
Yeah.
other, like I'm there for you. No, this is like the comments that you see online of like people that are like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened," or like
Yeah. Yeah.
something like
At
this.
least like feeling each other's, experience. So
Hmm.
that may be more helpful, but yeah, I don't know. I would definitely just pay attention to kind of what gets shaken up for you and
Hmm.
how that looks. And hopefully next week will be a little bit quieter. I actually think it is, but we get through this week first.
Yeah, I mean, happening on Valentine's Day though, like as the last point, it could be like, you and your partner or whoever you have, if you have somebody special, share like uh
Yeah.
sweet conversations or something like that. So it could be a good time for like just like romantic talkings or like a dinner or something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And like being able to really understand each other on that like soul level as Mercury and Pisces likes.
Right. And it's happening on a Friday too, ruled by Venus. So it should be
Yay.
like a sweet, cute day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all we have for you this week. So if you want more content from us, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Two Girls Talk Transits. And we'll see you guys next week.
See you.